Welcome all you mentees to part 1 of the X-Force Comprehensive Reading Order. This is the Uncanny Omar, and that's right, today we're going to look at the first part of this reading order, so please stay tuned. And welcome back everybody. Now before I get started, I want to give a huge shout out to our patrons. Every month I put up a poll on our Patreon where they vote. As a matter of fact, our next poll should be going up today or tomorrow, and that's for them to vote on the DC events in chronological order or all the Marvel events in chronological order. So that's all on our Patreon. If you want to check that out, all of that information is in the description down below. The other thing I want to say before I get started talking about X-Force is, if you haven't checked out my New Mutants reading order, that's really where all of this begins. It all begins in the New Mutants. I'll put that link up above if you want to click on that if you haven't had a chance to view that yet. Now, let's get started. Of course, we're going to kick it off where it all began. This is the X-Force Omnibus. A lot of these stories have already been collected in trade paperback format and in the Marvel Premiere format. So this kicks off in an interesting way with, like I said, New Mutants 98, 99, and 100, which kind of set the bar for what was to happen. Rob Liefeld came and took over Louise Simonson as the head writer and decided instead of New Mutants, they should be a force to be reckoned with. And he decided on the name X-Force. His scriptwriter at the time was Fabian Nicieza, and of course Fabian Nicieza went on to write X-Force after Liefeld left to create this small little studio called Image with his friends, and nothing was ever the same again for any company after that. This also collects the Kings of Pain crossover event, which is pretty interesting because it's actually the very first appearance of X-Force, but it happens between X-Force number 1 and New Mutants 100. But if you're reading it, they're already established as X-Force. It's the team of X-Force. It's Shatterstar, Warpath, Domino, Cable, Cannonball, and Boom Boom. And I always thought that was pretty interesting, especially reading it as a kid. But I like the way that this is mapped. I love the way that they kept it there. All the backup stories for the New Mutant stuff is in there. Oh, man. Here is actually this cover. Had a variant cover, and it's that one right there. And I always love that Art T-Bird piece right there. Some of these stories are also collected in the Deadpool Beginnings Omnibus because why not? I always thought that was pretty interesting. And here we have, of course, X-Force, the beginning of the Deadpool rave, I guess. But at the time, you know, we didn't think that character would blow up as much as he did. This is the crossover with Spider-Man. As a matter of fact, this is Todd McFarlane's last published issue at Marvel Comics. He was denied a part with the Juggernaut where Shatterstar, this isn't spoiling anything because you all know I don't like spoiling anything, but he was denied by his editor this part right here where Shatterstar takes a sword and stabs Juggernaut in the eye. His editor said, no, you can't do that. They got into a big fight, and that honestly was the straw that broke the camel's back that made him say, you know what, screw it, I'm going to make my own books. But that was a crossover event with Rob Liefeld's X-Force. It was the return of Black Tom Cassidy and Juggernaut. Here we have Mike Mignola pinup. Mike Mignola does some of the artwork in here. We have a new Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. And see, we got little cameos of Deadpool. You know, he didn't blow up to this superstar status that he has now. But here we have the formation of the new Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. At this point, I don't know if you can tell, but right here, this is Brian Murray helping out on inks. Marat Michaels helping out on inks. It's Rob Liefeld pretty much kind of creating his own Extreme Studios before they went over to Image. So a lot of his friends, Eric Larson actually helped him out on inks here too. And when I do these overviews, I talk about a little bit about the history. I don't like to talk about the spoilers aspect of things in case you've never read any of these books. This is the flashback episode because Cable came back to the past, and one of his main goals, this is all, of course, Rob Liefeld's plot, was to find out who the External was. And Externals are these mutants like Highlander that are immortal and can never die. And the flashback scene, which is actually an interesting way to do it because it's a flashback of something that's happening in the future, because, of course, Cable's from 1,000 years into the future. And all that is drawn by Mike Mignola. And now we have Mark Pasella taking over art duties and continuing. You see why I had to split this up into 2 parts? I'm going on and still just about this omnibus. And now we have the phenomenal Greg Capullo taking over art duties for X-Force right before a crossover event is about to happen. By now, Fabian Nicieza is the sole writer on X-Force. No more plots from Rob Liefeld, no more dangling plot lines. Well, I guess dangling plot lines that he himself, Fabian Nicieza, had to fix. And we also have the Cable issues in here. Of course, our next stepping stone is the X-cutioner song. And this is the crossover event where Cable shoots Professor X. Why? Well, if you've never read it, find out why. It crosses over into the pages of X-Factor, Uncanny X-Men, X-Men, and of course, X-Force. Now we have Greg Capullo drawing X-Force. And it's awesome because his first issue was issue 15. His first cover was issue 14. And literally his second issue is a crossover event, so we get to see him draw Wolverine, we get to see him draw members of X-Factor, members of X-Men, and I'm sure he was like, sure, let's do it. I'm a big fan of his artwork, long before he was doing Batman, long before he was doing Spawn. I loved his stuff on Quasar, and this is where he came right after Quasar. Here's Jay Lee on X-Factor issues. By the way, this is also collected in Epic format. As a matter of fact, X-Force is starting to be collected in Epic format. Not starting. Happened a couple of years ago. And I'll talk about one that comes out later on this year and where to read it here in a few seconds. But this is the X-cutioner song. X-Men Shattershot. Why the hell is this in here? Well, because this is the only place you're going to find X-Force Annual #1. As a matter of fact, it was just orphaned for so long. It was never collected in trade paperbacks. It had never been collected in oversized hardcover. And I'm talking years. So for a long time, a lot of us fans were like, well, crap. I guess they're never going to collect X-Force Annual #1. It's part of the Shattershot storyline. It's actually part 4, the final part. This actually happened before Greg Capullo took over the book. So you actually get the last of the Jim Lee X-Men issues. But Jim Lee only did the layouts of the X-Men Annual #1 and the cover. Yeah, he did the layouts, and then Greg Capullo did some of the finishes along with other artists. But the main reason to own this is because of this crossover event and this final issue, which is X-Force #1. But then all the little backup things are collected in here too. Deadpool and X-Force Omnibus. There is a reason why I do these comprehensive reading orders. Because in 2003, when I first started getting into the collected editions game, the very first thing I tried to do was try to build a Superman, Green Lantern, Batman, X-Men trade paperback. When there wasn't a lot back then. But even then, I was like, wait a minute. This isn't a volume 1, this isn't a volume 2. Where the hell do I go next? After doing so much research on my own, there used to be a website, and for all you old folks, I don't want to say old because this was 2002, 2003, there was a website called, I think it was like millerworld.tp, which just kinda, it was long outdated, but it still had like some of the trade paperbacks there. And then eventually I joined the Marvel Masterworks forum, and that really helped me out a lot. But the whole time I was like, where do I go next? So that's why I'm doing these videos, because these are the type of videos that I wish had existed when I first got into the collected editions game. And I hope I'm able to help a lot of you all out. And I know I've gotten a lot of compliments, and it's really awesome. So please, yeah, if you're getting help out of these, let me know in those comments down below. But this is the next place to go. Now we're starting to get, because they're cashing in on the movie, Deadpool and X-Force. But it's really X-Force Volume 2. I actually had a friend of mine, he made a custom dust jacket that says X-Force Volume 2, but I never put it on. Or I never got it printed, rather. So I probably need to do that. I think, because I like chronological orders of things. But yes, Greg Capullo is still on the book. But they're starting to collect issues of Cable in here too, which is cool because they used to have a Cable and X-Force or Cable Classics line, and then that got discontinued. And actually, we're going to look at one here in a little bit. But we have issues of Cable in here. Everything, actually, 99% of this book is all written by Fabian Nicieza. So these stories here take place after the events of X-cutioner song. I just wanted to look at this because some of this stuff is collected in the Deadpool Beginnings Omnibus as well. But here is the Joe Madureira, Fabian Nicieza, and Harry Candelario. Awesome miniseries, Deadpool. And I think this is the series that made a lot of people fans of Deadpool and were like, wait, This guy is actually pretty funny and could probably, you know, carry his own monthly title. But that wasn't to come for another few years. Now, if you want to read the full Fatal Attractions crossover event, only issue 25 of X-Force is collected in that omnibus of X-Force, but this collects the entire crossover plus other issues of Uncanny X-Men. But the entire event took place in the pages of X-Factor, X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, Wolverine, X-Force, and Excalibur. And it's this big event where a certain villain comes back, and there are certain things that happen to some characters. So yeah, you saw this in the omnibus, but the entire crossover is collected in the hardcover, or like I said, the milestone. Alright, Cable and X-Force. Because of the second Deadpool movie, now we have Cable and X-Force. So they're cashing in on the Cable name, which, honestly, I don't care. As long as we're getting Omnis out of... Oh, man. The Child's Play crossover with New Warriors. Hell yes! You all know how much of a fan I am of New Warriors, and I'm hoping they'll do a second omnibus. This is Derek Robertson now taking over for Mark Bagley on art duties in New Warriors. But anyway, where the hell was I? Oh, yes. I don't care what they end up calling it. They can call it X-Force and X-Force. As long as we get an X-Force Volume 4, I'm excited. They can call it whatever they want to. I'll keep making videos to make it simpler for everybody else out there. Marvel just keep making them. Again, we have a collection of X-Force stories, and we also have a collection of Cable stories. And Steve Skroce joins the Cable team. And Jeff Loeb, it's another guy that ended up joining that team. But yeah, I love this artwork here by Skroce. And of course, Skroce went on to become a storyboard artist for Hollywood. He did a little storyboard for a movie called The Matrix. And now we have Antonio S. Daniel as the regular penciler on X-Force. Tony Daniel, who went on to do Spawn after this. He had something for the 10th, I think is what it was called over there, at Image. Then eventually went over to Batman. Kind of following the suit of my boy, Greg Capullo. Here's the annual, where you have returning characters. You see characters coming back from New Mutants. So it's almost like a reunion every time I crack these open. And you also get the Phalanx crossover event in here. But just the X-Force and Excalibur and Wolverine and Cable parts of it. And those kind of go together, so you don't get the actual event. For that, you have to go here to the Phalanx Covenant hardcover. Also available in a milestone. So both the final issues of X-Force and Cable in this omnibus, and in a bit of a cliffhanger. And that cliffhanger, of course, takes us to one of the biggest crossovers in the history of X-Men. And of course, I'm talking about the Age of Apocalypse when I say one of the greatest crossover events in X-Men and Marvel history, really. So the reason I added this is because I want it to be thorough. I don't want you to be lost. So after reading Cable and X-Force Omnibus, you need to read this because it all leads to this. So Cable, of course, becomes the title X-Man, which kind of becomes its own thing, but that's another story. And X-Force becomes Gambit and the Externals. However, this right here, again, drawn by Tony S. Daniel, who ends up leaving the book, doesn't even get to finish it out. He was offered something at Image, and that's all she wrote. And there were some things behind the scenes between Fabi Nicieza, the head writer of not just X-Force, but also X-Men, and editorial. Not going to get into specifics, but so long, Fabi Nicieza. So when we come back into our reality, I'm sure you all know what the story of Age of Apocalypse is. That's not what this video is about. This is more about X-Force. Now, before I talk about the next book, I just want to remind you kind folks to please hit that like button, smash that notifications button to let you know when our videos are going live. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed yet. We put out videos every day. And if you want to join our Patreon, look in the descriptions down below for our information on the Patreon and our Redbubble. Great ways to support the channel. Cable and X-Force. So this is the Cable and X-Force Classics, Volume 1. So as I was saying, when you come back to this book, you will notice there's a new team on X-Force. And that is, of course, Adam Polina on artwork and Jeff Loeb writing the script and the story. So there's several changes to the lineup and the team, and honestly the storyline. you know, Adam Polina is one of these guys that, for some reason to me, never really blew up as much as I thought he was going to, because his artwork is phenomenal. I really like it. Ian Churchill is now drawing Cable. Jeff Loeb is still writing Cable. And we have hints of something called Onslaught coming. That's what all these books, all these X books are leading to another event after Age of Apocalypse. But yeah, Cable and X-Force are together now. And unfortunately, the second Classics volume of this got canceled. So volume 2 of this got canceled, even though it was solicited for a long time. But fear not, the powers at Marvel decided to keep going with the series. But instead of calling it Cable and X-Force volume 2, they decided to just call it Cable and X-Force Onslaught Rising. So again, we're hinted at something called Onslaught. This collects the annuals. This is all in chronological order. So this happens right after Cable and X-Force Classic number 1. Ian Churchill still drawing Cable. There's a crossover, yeah, with X-Man. And now you have Steve Scrooge before he left the book. I believe Roger Cruz took over after he left. And of course, Adam Polina still working it on X-Force. Taking us to Cable and X-Force Onslaught. This is the last book that is labeled Cable and X-Force. However, like I mentioned, X-Force are now getting Epic Collection, so I believe that's the route that Marvel wants to go. And Cable still had his own line. I've done a comprehensive reading order of Cable, haven't I? I have, right? I'm pretty sure I have. Sometimes it's hard to keep up with these. If I haven't, leave those comments down below. Or just look at the playlist. Hell, I'll look at the playlist. So this is the actual Onslaught event, but again, not collecting everything. Just collecting pretty much the parts that Cable has to play in the storyline, as well as the Incredible Hulk part, and then the crossover with X-Man. And the annuals. X-Force and Cable Annual, number 90, or the year 1996, not number 96. And, of course, the entire event is collected in the Omnibus, which unfortunately right now is out of print. Taking us to Operation Zero Tolerance. This is the next book if you want to keep reading X-Force. There are some orphaned issues in between this and the Onslaught book, because the Onslaught book ends with issue 61. This goes all the way to this starts with issue 67. And yeah, so you don't get everything yet. Like I said, Marvel's working on the X-Force Epic Collections. As a matter of fact, I'll talk about the next one here in a little bit. That hasn't come out yet. But this is the crossover event. There's a new bad guy. His name is Bastion. Not going to tell you his origin or what happened. When I do reviews of these books, like when we do Old Reader, New Reader, that's where you get the spoilers if you really want to know where, like, how I feel about these books or these storylines. But yes, feels like it was one event after the other. Now, before I talk about this book, I want to say that there is an X-Force Epic Collection Volume 7. It is called Operation Zero Tolerance, or I think it's just called Zero Tolerance. But it collects issues 67 through 84 and the -1 issue. So why is X-Men Apocalypse the 12 in here? Well, for the same reason that Shattershot's in there. Because X-Force 101 is collected in here. It's the aftermath of the 12 storyline, and it's called Powerless. You probably don't need to be a genius to figure out what it's about, but I don't want to spoil it for anybody. But yes, issue 101 is collected in here, and as I mentioned, is called Powerless. Luckily, 102 to 109 are collected all in this book right here, Counter X. And this is what I like to think of as, alright, things are about to change. For Marvel, things are about to change for X-Force, the writers, and the characters. And I think this is when they were testing the waters. This is when Warren Ellis came back to Marvel, and he started writing this book. Now, he had done some X-Men stuff in the past. He had done a run on Excalibur, where he created the character of Peter Wisdom. This character right here. Oh, yeah, that's right. You'll see characters from the Age of Apocalypse during this run. You see returning characters, and you also see changes of powers. Characters are now able to do, how do I put it, different things that they weren't able to do in the past. But you also have the return of this wonderful artist right here, and that is Whilce Portacio, who is amazing. I've always been a fan of his artwork. He was drawing Uncanny X-Men at the time that Jim Lee was drawing X-Men. Now, there is a second part to this storyline and this video, but that will come out next week. This is just part 1. Now, if you're interested in purchasing most of these books, don't forget to check out our sponsor,
cheapgraphicnovels.com.
your online home for brand new graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off the cover price. Cheap Graphic Novels prides itself on packaging your books so they arrive safely and in excellent condition, as well as prompt and helpful service. And check out their bargain bin for even greater deals up to 90% off cover price. And for you Minties, Cheap Graphic Novels is running a special promotion. If you're a first-time customer, let them know you were referred by Near Mint Condition at the checkout, and you'll receive a credit for free shipping on your next order. Now, this is only for U.S. customers. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discounts, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was part 1. Don't forget to tune in next week when I do part 2, and I go over everything from Counter X part 2 all the way up until the Dawn of X stuff, and I hope I was able to explain things and where to read them and how to collect them in this video. If you have any more questions about part 1, please leave those comments down below. If you're going to ask me about something that happened in the year 2010 with X-Force, wait until part 2. Please don't forget to hit that like, subscribe button, ring that bell for notifications to let you know when our videos are going live. If you haven't joined our Patreon, please think about joining our Patreon. We put out polls every month as to what the next comprehensive reading order should be. And there's other perks depending on the level on our Patreon. All of that information is in the description down below. More importantly, please everybody stay healthy, stay safe, and much love to you all.